Nation after the remains of a toddler was found in Manitoba.
It's an opportunity to share stories with, a different audience. I'm like, no, I'm on board.
And a new TV series is celebrating the Mi'kmaq people. Good evening, I'm Christian Achkate. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin with some sad news tonight. The Honourable Justice Murray Sinclair has passed at the age of just 73 years old. He was in a Winnipeg hospital for the past few months with his family and friends by his side. Sinclair was a prominent Anishinaabe man who has left quite the legacy. With more on his life, here's T.R. Wheatley.
Justice Murray Sinclair was most known for leading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. 5 years he traveled the country, hearing stories of survivors of the Indian residential school system. That work led to a report with 94 calls to action.
What the government of Canada did was cultural genocide.
He was a fourth-degree chief of the Métis Society. His spirit name, Mijinegi, an Anishinaabe name meaning one who speaks of pictures in the sky. A member of the Peguis First Nation, he was born on January 24, 1951. He died in hospital early Monday morning with his family by his side. Within hours, flags lowered outside the Manitoba legislature and a teepee set up for a sacred fire where Premier Wab Kinew was also helping with preparations.
I just hope that everybody takes a moment to remember this great, amazing person who's one of the true greats of our time from any walk of life, and he did something remarkable with his life. He had so many firsts that he accomplished.
Sinclair's career spanned some 45 years, first graduating from law school in 1979. 1988 was a notable year for Mijinegi. He became the first Aboriginal judge in Manitoba. That same year, he was named co-chair of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry, or AJI. The AJI was called at a time when there was heightened racial tension between mainstream and Indigenous Manitobans. While the AJI looked at the entire justice system, its main focus was the 1987 trial of two men in the Paw for the brutal killing of Helen Betty Osborne in 1971 and the 1988 death of First Nations leader J.J. Harper, who was shot by a Winnipeg police officer after being racially profiled. The AJI report was released in 1991 with 296 recommendations.
The hearings themselves created a great change, a sea of change in the attitude of people towards Aboriginal justice issues.
In January 2001, Sinclair was appointed to the Court of Queen's Bench. He also started training judges on Indigenous law and social justice through the National Judicial Institute. Chief Justice of the Court of King's Bench, Glenn Joyal, worked alongside and became close with Sinclair.
When he got the call to do the TRC, he spoke to me about it. When he got the call to become a senator and finally leave the judiciary, he spoke to me about it. So I had an opportunity to see how he was answering important calls to perform a very public duty as he saw it.
Sinclair officially retired from the bench in January 2016. 3 months later, he was appointed to the Senate by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. As senator in November 2018, Sinclair penned the Thunder Bay Police Services Board investigation. It had 45 recommendations to address systemic racism in a city where Indigenous people often spoke of shoddy investigations. In June 2020, he took to social media to denounce then RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, who didn't believe there was systemic racism within the RCMP. Get rid of the racists and you will still have a racist system, he said, referring to the fact the system, not just the people, need to change. Mijinegi retired from the Senate in January 2021. He said he wanted to spend more time writing his memoir. Just last month, his memoir, Who We Are, 4 Questions for a Life and a Nation, hit the shelves. The book started from writing letters to his granddaughter Sarah so she would know her family lineage. The memoir ended up becoming a 3-generation collaboration with Sarah and her father Nigan. Manitoba Kiwetanui Ugamaganuk, Grand Chief Garrison Siti saying, like his legacy, his passing is far-reaching.
It's a great loss because we've had a statesman that represented Canada, but also a warrior that represented our causes. And he's been there for our people for so long, and it's hard to imagine a Canada without Murray Sinclair.
In November 2021, Sinclair began overseeing negotiations about compensating First Nations children and families entangled in the child welfare system following the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. In July 2022, Métis spoke out about Catholic Pope Francis's apology to survivors, saying the Church continues to harm Indigenous people with the doctrine of discovery. In August 2022, Sinclair was appointed as a special advisor and elder in residence for the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. Throughout his career, Métis received dozens of accolades, including 2 Inspire Awards, one in 1994 in the Law and Justice category, and again in 2017 for Lifetime Achievement. He also has 14 honorary doctorates from universities across Canada and was Chancellor for Queen's University for 1 term. Sheila North is the Executive Director of Indigenous Engagement at the University of Winnipeg, where Sinclair was honored in 2011. She reflects on when she first heard of Sinclair during the AJI.
Impression I had of him, that he was very smart, very straightforward, and didn't mess around. And when I met him the first time, I got that same sense that he was full of integrity, that he was the way he was behind the scenes, and he was that he held that esteem and that authority no matter who he was in front of.
In 2022, Sinclair was awarded the Adrienne Clarkson Prize for Global Citizenship. In May 2022, he received an Order of Canada, and this past summer he received the Order of Manitoba. Just last month, he also received the King Charles III's Coronation Medal. Details about funeral arrangements are still not known. Sinclair's sacred fire will remain lit here at the Manitoba Legislature for the next 4 days. TR Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thank you, TR. Sinclair will be laid to rest next to his wife, Catherine, who passed away earlier this year at the end of June. He leaves behind his 5 children and 5 grandchildren. The Sinclair family also released a statement earlier today. The impact of our dad's work reached far across the country and the world, from residential school survivors to law students to those who sat across from him in a courtroom. He was always known as an exceptional listener who treated everyone with dignity and respect. We know that stories of his kindness, generosity, and fairness will circulate for generations to come. The Sinclair family have asked for privacy in their time of mourning. In lieu of flowers, they have asked the public to donate to the Murray Sinclair Memorial Fund at the Winnipeg Foundation, where the fund will prioritize Indigenous women, families, and survivors. There will be a public ceremonial event, and information will be made in the coming days. The death of Murray Sinclair also had politicians taking a pause in Ottawa on Monday. This included Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who took a few minutes to talk to the media about what Sinclair meant to him. Have a listen.
To me, he was a teacher, a challenge function, a guide, an elder, a sage, and a friend, as he helped me and this country navigate through something that we will be navigating through for decades still, this reconciliation journey that we have taken some important strides on, but where there remains so much more to do.
A toddler's death is now being investigated as a homicide by the Manitoba RCMP after a child's remains were found inside a barn in the province's Interlake region. The victim has been identified as Xavia Skye Lynn Butler, who would have been 1 to 2 years old at the time of her death. RCMP say no missing persons report was ever filed. Reporter Sarah Benton spoke with one of the toddler's caregivers and brings us this update.
Xavia Skye Lynn Butler's former caregiver, Natalie Anderson, is demanding justice after RCMP announced the toddler's death is being investigated as a homicide. Xavia's remains were discovered on June 3rd in a barn off Highway 6 in the rural municipality of Grahamdale. Anderson raised Xavia until she was 9 months old.
It was a blessing. It was a gift. There was so much love. She was a happy little girl. She was always smiling. She was always laughing.
Anderson claims she had an agreement with her cousin, Xavia's biological mother, to raise a child from birth. She said the last time she saw Xavia in person was in March 2022, after the child was placed back into her biological mother's care through Child and Family Services. Anderson said she video chatted with Xavia until the biological mother suddenly stopped communicating.
I didn't really have an explanation. Like, she didn't tell me why she was stopping, or she didn't, like, there was just really no communication.
Xavia's family is originally from the Pénématang First Nation, located about 240 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg. A month after Xavia's remains were found in a barn, owner Natasha Kitcher painted the structure orange, with the words "Every Child Matters" written on the roof. Anderson believes that Xavia would still be alive if she remained under her care.
She deserves to still be here, but she's not. If Xavia was still with me, I'm pretty sure, like, she'd still be alive if she was still with me.
RCMP are asking the public for any photos taken of Xavia after March 2022, when she was last physically seen. Anyone with information may call the Manitoba RCMP tip line at 431-489-8112. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs is also mourning the loss of a newly elected chief. We'll tell you more when we come back in about 3 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back. The people of Poplar River First Nation in Manitoba is in mourning this week after the sudden death of their newly elected chief. Over the weekend, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs announced the passing of Chief Tanya Bittern. Bittern, who was previously a councillor and a secretary-treasurer, was just elected as chief of her First Nation last Wednesday. She was set to begin serving her 4-year term this Monday. Bittern is being remembered as a strong matriarch and leader and a loving mother and grandmother. In a statement, the AMC said, "This loss is profoundly felt across our nations, reminding us that when one nation grieves, we share in that sorrow." No word yet on if there will be an interim chief for the First Nation. The past weekend, the fall 2024 Métis Nation Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly was held in Regina. Delegates from all 12 MNS regions came together to discuss the Métis Constitution. During a special citizenship ceremony, MNS President Glenn McCollum discussed the Coming Home resolution passed on May 25th, which allows Métis with Saskatchewan roots to be added to the MNS registry. 5 individuals received Coming Home cards, recognizing them as Métis Nation Saskatchewan citizens, even though they do not live in the province. One of them was Brian Trottier, a 6-time Stanley Cup winner with the New York Islanders from Val-Marie, Saskatchewan. We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation with us. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Groups of Indigenous peoples from across the world gathered in Geneva, Switzerland earlier in October to share their experiences with resource extraction projects in their traditional lands. They say projects under the banner of green or clean energy continue to disregard the rights of Indigenous people. Reporter Sav Jonza spoke to one of the attendees.
Resource extraction projects aimed at reducing a society's carbon footprint are in some ways not necessarily better than their non-renewable counterparts. That's partly because many corporations leading these projects do so on the homelands of Indigenous peoples without meaningfully consulting with them first.
I think that's the big distinction. You know, if business is being done, you know, as usual and status quo, the way that it's always done, then, you know, what is the difference?
Lisa Raven is a land guardian who attended an Indigenous-led summit in Geneva, Switzerland this October about the issue. 95 Indigenous peoples representing communities from across the globe attended to share their perspectives and lived experiences. Raven went as a member of Camp Morningstar, a land defender group located next to Lake Winnipeg in Manitoba, and as part of the Coalition for Securing Indigenous Peoples' Rights in the Green Economy, or SURGE. She says transitioning to a green economy, one that hopes to mitigate climate change by investing in renewable energy projects, may sound nice, but just because the end product may be renewable doesn't mean the process to get it is always environmentally friendly.
The word, you know, that got coined and I heard a lot over there was green colonization. And so, you know, greenwashing, all of these projects, you know, for sake of the environment, but meanwhile, you know, it's harmful for the environment.
She says projects like silica sand mining, which Camp Morningstar is fighting against in their traditional territory near Hollowwater First Nation, still affect the environment even if the product will be used for things like solar glass panels instead of fracking for fossil fuels. Raven believes that's why Indigenous people whose land the projects will operate on should be informed and included in the development process. People who have an intrinsic responsibility and connection to the lands affected.
Because these decisions, they don't only impact us today, but they're going to impact, you know, people for years to come. I think that was what was so striking for me in Geneva, was hearing, you know, from a lot of the different peoples how today their women and their reproductive systems are being impacted from projects in the past.
At the summit, the Indigenous representatives created a document outlining 11 principles that corporations and governments must adhere to when creating these projects to respect the rights of and protect the well-being of Indigenous people. They include transparency, ending the criminalization of Indigenous environmental defenders, and recognizing the role Indigenous peoples play as guardians of their lands. Raven says the summit was eye-opening and that she's grateful to have attended.
I think bringing everybody together to share that and to create that understanding and that relationship, I think that only, makes us stronger as Indigenous people and as a voice.
Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A new TV series is educating the wider public about the Mi'kmaq people on the East Coast. That story when we come back in less than 3 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. From the Gitxsan Nation and along Highway 16, Clarence Jones sent in this winter wonderland high up in the mountains. Thanks for thinking of us, Clarence. With winter approaching, we want to see how you're preparing and what your area looks like. So make sure to send us a picture to share at aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east, St. John's 4, Charlottetown 10 with rain. Cartwright 3, La Grande River 4 with rain. Quebec City 10, Saint Jovite 16. 22 in Toronto, Sarnia 23. Sioux Lookout 7, Big Trout Lake 5. 2 in God's Lake, Puckatawagan -1. 6 in Gimli, Princess Harbor 7. 7 in Estevan, Saskatoon +1. 0 in La Ronge, Middle Lake 3. Fort McMurray -2, Peace River 3. 7 in Calgary, Red Deer 2. Tofino 12, Campbell River 10. Sandspit 10, Smithers 0. -5 in Watson Lake, Dawson -1. -2 in Yellowknife, Wrigley -5. Inuvik -9. Palutuk -8. Chesterfield -15, Whale Cove -15 as well. And Clyde River -10 and Arctic Bay -11. And finally tonight, a new series called Mi'kma'ki celebrates the stories of the Mi'kmaq people. It was developed to preserve and revitalize Mi'kmaq culture and history. Angel Moore reports.
This episode of Mi'kma'ki features knowledge holder Duma Young explaining in Mi'kmaq to host Jarvis Gugu about Ilmi Busam, traditional medicines. Working with elders over the years, Young has identified up to 1,000 plants.
And so it's a combination of how I learned was growing up, living on a trap line, listening to elders, and also using academic knowledge.
Jarvis Gugu is from the Wegogama First Nation. He was delighted to host Mi'kma'ki and share Mi'kmaq history.
And I was enthusiastic. I say, you know what, this is a great idea. It's an opportunity to share stories with, a different audience. I'm like, you know what, I'm on board.
Andrew Younger produced the show for his company, the Wellsung Group, a television and media production house. He was inspired to develop the series so people can understand what is going on in Mi'kmaq communities.
I've always had a real interest in Mi'kmaq history, and one of the things I'm seeing more and more in social media is people not understanding the history of the Mi'kmaq and why many of the issues that have come up politically exist.
Gugu traveled around the province, speaking to Mi'kmaq people about their rich culture and history and learning hands-on skills, such as braiding sweetgrass.
So what I learned was you can actually transport sweetgrass from its original native location or its spot to making a flower bed elsewhere. Somebody who has a green thumb probably knew that was common sense. That was actually something that was new to me.
This episode may have focused on traditional medicines, but others will feature the meaning of regalia, art, and repatriation of Mi'kmaq artifacts. Gugu says the series will educate people about Mi'kmaq culture.
But somebody out there loves dancing. Somebody out there loves sewing. Somebody out there loves fishing. And through interviewing these people in the series, I got to learn a little bit of something of each of that. And I want our audiences to learn, not just Mi'kmaq, but even non-Mi'kmaq, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, whether it's here in Mi'kma'ki or elsewhere.
The 13 45-minute episodes air on community television, and they will eventually be posted on YouTube next year. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabutuk, also known as Halifax.
And you can also watch that series by downloading the CBC Gem app. And that's your evening newscast for this Monday, November 4th. From our staff from across the country, hi miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.